Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Great Shakeout AD meeting. Tim and I were talking, and it seems like every year the Great Shakeout falls on an AD meeting day somehow. It must align with Thursdays, I guess. I thought it was a certain day of the month, but it's always
on Thursday. It's always the
Thursday. Well,
we have a slide for when it's the shakeout. So
okay.
We have one.
Many of you in your buildings that you're in are probably going through drills, and so at 10:15 we'll try to honor that, and we'll do a drill here as well. Great shakeout. We'll prepare. That's likely some kind of an emergency that many of us will get the chance to experience at some point in our lives. And some of us have had that already in the past. So I'm going to start out though today because I might have to be in and out for some other responsibilities. So I want to start out with my appreciations for each of you taking your time to join us today. For Rebecca Hatch helping to fill in for Amy, who's off, and sending out our slides ahead of time, and the links to the meeting materials. To Emily for facilitating our meeting. Always does such a wonderful job. And then to each of our staff members here for putting together your content information to support our assessment directors across the state of Utah. Learning intentions, we'd like to just pause on these for a minute each week to try to keep us as staff grounded and also to make sure that you in the field know what our goals are. Really that increased capacity to support you in your work is the overarching umbrella of our purpose of meeting and the reason that we come to work to try to help you with the responsibilities you have in the field. Go to the next slide.
And as we're going to the next slide, we really do need you to join Nearpod. We have multiple, at least 5 different collaborative boards or areas where we're requesting feedback. I only have 21 people in Nearpod right now, and yes, I am looking.
Right. One thing I've learned, and I've been participating in the political process in Utah actively since the mid-90s. I got involved in my neighborhood caucus meetings and county conventions, state conventions. One thing that I've learned is if only 24 people show up, that magnifies their voice quite a bit. So those of you who are in there, you got an opportunity to be more representative maybe, and those of you who aren't, you might want to get in there so that your voice is added to the pool and adds to the quality of our responses overall and what we do with that information. So on my desk upstairs, I've got a little plaque in a frame or a saying in a frame that a student gave me in 1996, 97. I was working as a school counselor at the time with this young lady, and her mother had some unique challenges in their family situation, and she had some unique goals I was trying to help them through. And she gave me this at the end of the school year. I appreciated it at the time, and I've kept it out this month, and particularly for some reason, it's been going through my mind about the power of encouragement. And I've thought back about people who've encouraged me in my life in different ways and who do encourage me even today. And then I've tried to think about, overall, am I an encouraging person? And the different relationships that I have. And I've tried to set a refocus in my life to be more encouraging, especially with the young people that I interact with. So I wanted to just share this thought, give you an opportunity to just think about the power of encouragement. I think this is true, not just for the girl who gave this to me as somebody who had hopefully been a positive influence in her life, but for the people in my life that provided encouragement. So that's my thought for this month.
I would have been a junior in high school when we got that.
Would you? She was a senior. Yeah. Ironically, I actually don't feel bad about it. Not yet sensitive to age as much as maybe I will be at some point. So updating everybody on the progress of some of these things we've talked about previously. 404, the requirements for assessments, that passed. The full board, so did our standards test administration and testing ethics passed and has been approved. And then 406, early learning benchmark assessment passed. We'll go into a couple of slides to give a little more detail. And then our contract with CAI for additional item development. That contract amendment's just over $4 million. And those funds come from carry forward funds, money we've been able to save over the last number of years, including through the pandemic when assessment was interrupted, and so we had some cost savings in the spring of 2020 with several of our state assessments. We've been able to use those funds, and the board supported us in building out our item banks in the RISE platform, which has been an important part for us as we continue to move forward with having a robust test bank, but also being able to advance our interest in providing remote summative testing for those students who are in remote learning settings. So we continue to focus on that. We know that we have challenges with getting enhanced item banks around secondary Math 1 and science to be able to fully accommodate that. I want everybody to know that's the path we're on. This contract amendment that our board executed and supported is part of that. Let's go to the next slide. In committee, they talked about a statewide single SIS system. Many of you who are listening are probably not too interested in that conversation. Some of you, especially if you work also in IT responsibilities in your LEA, this would be something that would catch your attention. From an assessment perspective, should this move forward and the board adopt a single or decide to adopt a single SIS, that would take some time. That wouldn't be something that would happen right away. And eventually what that could mean for assessment is it would reduce the amount of time between when in an LEA you enroll a student or transfer a student from one class to another, that information makes it to the assessment vendor's system. It could drastically reduce that time and allow us to be more real time on that. Most of your LEAs have at some point or another experienced disruptions related to UTREX data transfers, either caused by data input on your side or caused by our system having some kind of a failure or caused by the vendor having some problem receiving it. So you have all these points of potential error. And in that way, that's where a single statewide SIS could be beneficial to at least statewide assessment. We'll keep you posted. You might want to attend to that discussion in the May board meeting when the Finance Committee reports out. So 404, if you remember, I think it was in January, we came and we did a Jamboard. We gathered feedback from this group to talk about this idea of the state or the LEA assessment plan and the requirements for LEAs to submit that each year by a certain date. There had been an audit that had been conducted earlier that had questioned that, and the recommendation from this group and then subsequently the APAC committee was to move that to an assurance. The board accepted and went forward with the recommendations that were brought to them. So beginning this fall, rather than LEAs having to submit your assessment plan, there'll be an assurance that we'll create. It'll be as seamless as possible. Kim's maybe already working on it now. I don't know. She and I haven't talked about it since the board meeting, but expect there'll be a change where you'll just provide an assurance that you've completed that. Next slide will just remind everybody there still is a requirement for the plan.
One quick reminder, though, that you need to remember is that the testing plan was always due in September, but the assurance is going to be due in August. So it will be a month sooner. So just,
thank you for highlighting
I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that because we've gotten really used to September 15th, but it's now August 15th. So
I would expect many of you complete your assessment plan in the spring or early summer so that your schools are aware of all the requirements. So I brought this back that this part of the rule is still intact. So the plan and the elements that are required for you as an LEA to complete, this is what you'll be offering an assurance to. You just won't have to submit all the details of your plan to the State Board of Education. Next slide. So reading on grade level, there's been a lot of meetings on this, and it's really triggered since the would have been the September Education Interim Committee that was held in St. George, where part of that meeting they required or requested, I guess that's the same word when it's the legislature coming to the board, us to publish a rank order list of LEA's third grade reading on grade level. Even though the third grade benchmark had been in our accountability technical manual since 2019, and part of the school report card is a non-scored indicator since then as well. There really hadn't been much attention given to it by many parties at all. With that list being published, it brought up a lot of discussion. I was very impressed with how much attention and interest the board gave to this. There was meetings, several meetings, committee meetings, full board meetings, study session, back to full board meeting, and you'll see here that they've made an adjustment on the third grade reading on grade level now will be the 405 composite score on end of year benchmark for third grade. They referenced the rule there as well. So I also want to express my appreciation. Some of our community that's on this meeting today gave input to our Board of Education for them to consider. And that's always very helpful when voices can be shared to help increase people's understanding. We have an upcoming Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee meeting in May. The draft agenda right now, we'll be looking at changes to our preschool entry-exit profile because there was legislative change that we have to use that assessment to measure growth, which the current one needs to have some changes made for that. And we'll be working with the Center for Assessment to do the validity work through that process as well. I'll update the group on the reading and Utah Aspire Plus studies that we've talked about previously in this meeting. We've selected partners to conduct those both of those elements of research. The reading one is scheduled to be completed by August 1st, and then the Utah Aspire Plus, I think it is mid-November or 1st of November when that partner will have that work completed, and we'll obviously keep this group informed as that work goes on as well. And then we've had a request to talk about full academic year requirements and those impacts and on student group disaggregation. So our impact we expect we'll have discussion about that. If there are items that anybody in this group thinks we need to address with our policy committee, this formal advisory committee to the board, certainly feel free to email those to me. We're open to, we've got a little bit more time. We could fit some more into that agenda, or I could put it on an agenda for an upcoming future impact meeting. I think that concludes all of my slides. I'll pause for just a minute to see if there are any questions in the field.
There is a question online. So the assessment plan will not be done as a survey like before, and we will just submit something with all of the assessments, dates, and trainings by August 15th.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the difference between an assurance and submitting your plans is the assurance, you won't be required to tell us any of the elements of the plan. So you won't need to submit dates to us of training, dates of your assessments. What you will submit to us, and it'll be on a digital platform, most likely, you'll just click and put your signature that you have completed those requirements for your LEA. And that will be August 15th is the date that we'll ask that to be completed. As we get close, as we approach that date, our team will communicate to you as assessment directors the process for providing that assurance.
And we'll have a form that you'll fill out. Yeah, it will still be a form that you're going to fill out and sign. You don't have to come up with something yourself. So yeah, that's what we're working on. We just have to make sure the language is right. So,
any other questions for me? Okay, all right. I think we have Malia and Tracy here who are also scheduled to go to some of you on this call probably are maybe attending 2 meetings at once. We have the special education directors are meeting today. And a few of us will be running down there for times later on their agenda. Appreciate you guys joining us in person. I thought you would be joining remotely, so thank you.
Well, yeah, no, easier to be in person sometimes. So, okay. The annual performance report. So some of you that have been around have probably heard about this, kind of talked about it over the last couple of years. Those of you that are new, could be definitely new information. So every year, every state is required to submit an annual performance report to the Office of Special Education Programming, to OSEP. And we have 15, 17 indicators, Malia, soon to be 18, 20. Anyway, we have multiple indicators that we're required to report back to OSEP. And one of them is indicator 3, which is a results indicator, and we report back to them assessment data for students with disabilities. So that's what indicator 3 is. And if you can go to the next slide. So we have some updates that needed to happen. Every 5 years, a state is required to update baselines and targets for all of those indicators. Or if we have a change in something that goes on with assessment, we have to update those. So we wanted to come and bring to you, we have an update that needed to happen this year, but I also want to just kind of really quickly go through each indicator so you can understand what special education data gets reported back to OSEP. Go ahead, Kim. So within indicator 3, we have 4 parts of that indicator. Within each indicator, we have sub-indicators where I think it's a total of like 26 or 28 targets, if that sounds right, Malia, that we report on. And so our first sub-indicator is 3A, participation rate for children with IEPs. So we report to them the number and percentage of our students with disabilities that participate in all of our statewide assessments. So this is our RISE, Utah Aspire Plus, and DLM assessments. So we also look at our students who have participated in the alternate assessment. So with this reporting, we look at grades 4, we look at grade 8, and then we look at grade high school. And this is the update that is happening is with high school. So we take that participation of all of our students with disabilities enrolled in our schools that are anticipated to participate, how many of them did. So we report back to them that participation. This indicator includes both our general education assessment and alternate assessment. So we take our RISE, Utah Aspire Plus kiddos and DLM and put them together in one calculation for this. One of the nuances with this participation calculation that I think is different than what we do with our state accountability and school report card is we, state accountability, we get to exclude, right, our parent opt-outs, I believe, is that correct? Because that's a legislative component. So with OSEP, right, it's a federal reporting, we are not allowed to exclude those parent opt-out right from that denominator. So that's a big one for participation for 3A. So we look at those students, how many of them participated. Go ahead, Ken.
So Tracy, on the parent opt-out for accountability, what you said is true only up until 5%. So we have a 95% participation requirement on federal accountability. So anything above 95% of those participation codes don't negatively impact an LEA on federal accountability reporting. Once you get below that, though, it is still accountable. And if Anna Michelle is on with us,
She can
she
talk
can
more
either
about that.
confirm
Okay.
or
Perfect. So, and with indicator 3A, right, we don't get to do any wiggle room with all of that, right? We take here's our students that are identified as special education students. They're enrolled, right, during the assessment window. They're expected to participate. How many of those did? So it's a pretty straightforward calculation in that realm. Okay, so then our next indicator is 3B. And indicator 3B, we look specifically at the proficiency rate of our students with disabilities on our grade level academic achievement standards. So this is our regular assessment. So we are looking specifically at students with disabilities in RISE and Utah Aspire Plus. Of the students that participated, right, and had a valid assessment, right, how many of those students were proficient? So we're looking specifically at that. In previous years, they used to lump proficiency. They used to actually lump our regular assessment and alternate assessment together in proficiency. But in recent years, they've separated that. So we do look specifically just at proficiency of our students with disabilities on our RISE assessment and Utah Aspire Plus. Go ahead. The next indicator now is 3C. And 3C, we look at the proficiency rate of our students with disabilities against our alternate, achievement standards. So this is specifically looking at DLM, right? So those students who have been identified, right, as those 1% takers, right, that 1% flag, how many of our students were proficient in our alternate assessment? And then 3D, go ahead, Kim. 3D is a new calculation that came in a couple years ago. So we now are required to look at the gap, which really kind of is in alignment with what our goal is in special education as a whole, right? Like as a whole, we're looking to close the gap for our kiddos, right? We want them performing and being with their regular peers to the best of our abilities. So we now actually produce a gap calculation. And so the way this calculation works, and it's only looking at our general education assessment. It is comparing the gap in proficiency of our students with disabilities compared to all students. So the nuance with this calculation when we calculate it is that all student group that we're looking at also includes our students with disabilities. So it's every student, right, that is enrolled, that's expected to participate, or that has a proficiency score, sorry, all of those students that have a proficiency score, what is the gap amongst our students with disabilities? So when we look at calculations and we look at rates, 3A, 3B, and 3C, right? That's our participation in statewide assessments, proficiency on our regular assessment, and proficiency on our alternate assessment. When we set targets and we're looking at making progress in those, we want to see those numbers increase, right? We want to see participation increase. We want to see proficiency increase. This is that one calculation where it's the flop, right? We want to close that gap. And so this is that calculation where when we look at setting our targets, we want to see that gap decrease, right, down to a 0. So this has been it's a new one, and it's been a hard one for our special ed directors to really wrap their heads around. We get a lot of questions around this 3D calculation. But that's what it is. We're looking for that decrease in that gap. So with that, as an overview, those are all of our indicators. And again, with each one of those, A, B, C, and D, we report reading and math, grade 4, 8, and high school. So we're actually looking at 6 areas within each one of those, if that makes sense, right? So we calculate it separately for reading grade 4, reading grade 8, reading high school. So why we're bringing this to you today and where we do need your input is in previous years, USBE did not report actual data on grade 9 back to the federal government. So we'd always reported grade 9, but we had reported zeros. So in previous years, all of our targets and baseline for that high school indicator was always just grade 10. We made the decision point this year collectively with assessment, with Leah, with Darren, I think Emma Michelle was at the table, Malia and I. So we all came together and talked about this reporting component. We made the decision to move forward with submitting back to the feds both grades 9 and grade 10. So when we made that decision point, what happened with our high school reporting group, we had to reset baseline and reset our targets for the next 5 years because that data is combined. So OSEP does not, they won't separate, right? To say, hey, Utah, which group are you using? If you submit any high school data, 9 through whatever, 10, 11, 12, they combine that into one reporting group. So that put us in a space. Part of what we're required to do is when we do reset baselines and targets, we're required to go out and get stakeholder feedback, right, and input on those targets. So what we are presenting to you are our new baseline and targets. This went to assessment directors last year. Leah took it to our UC panel, which is kind of like our APAC panel, but for special education. And we took the new targets and everybody gave feedback, which in fact, we really didn't have feedback. So collectively, so far, all of our stakeholder groups have approved and moved forward. We have to resubmit all of this information back to OSEP by April 25th. So you are our last group that we're coming to. So go ahead, Kim. So what we wanted to do is present the data analysis, kind of talk through the decision points that we made, the calculations that we did, and look at that data. And this is where Malia comes in because she's way better than I am at that.
Okay, so resetting baselines, basically there's not really a choice. You're just resetting it to the year in which the data changed. But the targets, we get some choice and some flexibility in how we want to go about that. And so I'll just walk you through what we did. And if you have any feedback, objections, suggestions, you'll have an opportunity afterward to provide those.
So really quickly, let me throw one more plug. So why this becomes really important for you guys, right, and your special education directors, and why we need your feedback, because so we get, I guess judged, if you will, I don't know if that's the right word, but so we submit all this to OSEP, right? Utah as a state ends up with a determination, right, whether we meet requirements, don't, upon all of our indicators, and there's different activities. So how this flows into your LEA, right, is it gets passed down to your special ed directors through what's called the RDA process. So I don't know, as you've worked with your special ed directors, if you've heard that, so results-driven accountability. So your LEA, right, ends up having the same reporting on all the same indicators, if that makes sense. And based upon that, right, like they get a determination, and how your LEA is compared is set to USBE performance, right? So, and Malia, correct me if I'm wrong. So like an LEA target is the same as our state targets, or their rating is based upon our state data?
Their rating and their target are both based on the state target.
The state targets, okay? So in essence, as we approve these across the state, right, these are also the targets that then your LEA is set to meet. Does that make sense? Okay.
And you also may want to join Nearpod, because as soon as Malia's done, this is when you're going to have a chance to give feedback.
Yeah, and I need that feedback, by the way.
Only 56 people are on, so.
So yeah, so I do, like, we are required to gather that feedback. So yeah, go ahead.
There's a little bit of chatter on Zoom. Anne Michelle had clarified that this change is made possible by the shift to end of level high school assessment as opposed to the end of course. And then the question came about, I'm unclear as to why the switch to end of level assessment makes the change possible. Can you clarify for me?
So that is not why we're resetting baseline and targets. So when we moved to Utah Aspire Plus, someone help me, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago?
2018,
2018, whenever, however long.
I have it memorized.
Yeah, I have chosen to not, apparently. So that's a great clarifying thing. So like whenever we make a shift like that in assessment, we're also required to set baseline and target. So back when we made that shift, right, from the RISE course base to the end of level, we reset targets and baseline. So the reason why we have to do it again now is because our data sets, right, so previous baseline and targets, remember, we were only submitting grade 10 data. So everything was based on just grade 10. When we looked at that reporting group, high school, they call it high school, right? It was only grade 10 data. So now that we're submitting grade 9, right, it's combined. Does that make sense? So now we have 2 grade levels that are combining into that high school that we're looking at, that puts us in that space to have to reset again. So good clarification.
Okay. Okay, so I'll go ahead and show you walk through the data and what we did to come up with our proposed targets. So for 3A, the participation rate, actually we don't get a choice on our target. The target is always 95%. So go ahead and give us feedback on that if you want, but our target is what it is. And the bottom 2 rows in this table show you what our data would have been in the past 2 years, as well as what it was this year based on combining grades 9 and 10 for our high school group. So we've been improving. That's great. We know after COVID, participation rates across the board in all kinds of aspects of school were low. So we're bouncing back. That's great. Let's keep up that great work. Okay, so the rest of the 3 charts are going to have 3 rows of data. So the top rows, or 3 sets of rows of data, the top 2 rows it says current targets. So that's the data that was based off of when we were only submitting grade 10 for high school. And then the middle 2 rows are the proposed targets. And then the bottom 2 rows are what the data for the last 2 years and for this year are based on, including both 9 and 10 in our data. So what we did to come up with the proposed target, in the top two rows, if you look at what the data was, and then on the right side in yellow where it shows the difference, 2023 minus 2022, 2024 minus 2022, 2025 minus 2022. It shows the difference in the percent that we would be trying to strive for based on our old targets. And so what we did is we took that same trajectory, that same difference in the targets from year to year, and we just applied it to our new baseline. So our new baseline, this is federal fiscal year 2022. That's the 2022-2023 school year data. So the most recent year of end of level testing. So that's our new baseline. And so we just apply that same trajectory to our new baseline. And that's how we came up with the new targets. So just kept it really simple. The trajectory, the proposed targets, if you look at how we did the recent 3 years in language arts and math, overall, we improved in language arts in the last 3 years. Math has kind of been up and down, but language arts, if we keep up that same trajectory of improvement, it's definitely possible to hit our target, at least for the next 2 years. That third year might be a little tougher. With OSEP, they actually often recommend for states to, instead of having equal increments on your goal targets each year, they recommend starting with smaller increments, and then they want your overall, your 5-year target to be pretty high. And so they let you just kind of have that last year be a bigger bump. And then that way you're more likely to hit your targets each year as you're going along. And hopefully you're building on your growth over the years to where that big jump up in the target that last year is something that your growth from year to year in getting better each year is you're maybe have a chance of meeting that last year's goal, but have a pretty good chance of meeting all the interim goals until that last year.
So when we did this, we found, and you can see, right, like the targets themselves were still pretty fairly close to what was previously set, right? You know, a few were higher, a few were lower, but they were very similar. It didn't change the data a whole lot.
Yeah, the 9th and 10th grade combined is really similar outcomes to what it was with 10th grade only. Okay, so this table shows for the alternate assessments. Again, the same data. The top 2 rows are the targets based on when it was grade 10 only in the calculation. The bottom 2 rows show you what the data would have been if we had been reporting grade 9 and 10 together all along. That 2022 data is our new baseline, and we apply that trajectory from our current targets to our proposed targets to come up with the new proposed targets. And then again, if you look at the data on the bottom 2 rows, you can see that some of the years in our data for language arts, we would have already met the next 2 years targets. So these are definitely very attainable targets. And in math, same thing, 19.66% proficiency in the 2020 federal fiscal year. So based on that, it's definitely very attainable for us to hit 15.2% proficiency in the 2025 federal fiscal year.
And this is alternate assessment again. 3C is alternate assessment.
Okay, and then 3D, the gap data. So Tracy said we're looking for to close the gap, we're looking for this number to get smaller. And so note that in the differences in yellow are now negative numbers instead of positive. So this is the percentage point difference. And so we're looking at closing the gap in language arts with the proposed targets currently from 36.27 to 34.59 in federal fiscal year 2025. And for math, we're looking to close the gap from 26.21 to 25.52. And if you look at our recent 3 years of data in the bottom 2 rows for grades 9 and 10 combined, that we're making really good progress in closing the gap. And if we can keep that up, we can absolutely hit these targets.
Okay, so this is where you guys come in and we need your feedback. So can you, like, do you agree with this? Do you not agree with this? Do you have comments? When we did with special education directors, we just, we had them throw it in chat too, right? Like, do we feel like these are proposed targets? This is what we should move forward with. And that's the feedback that we now need before we zip it off back to OSEP next week. And it can be a simple yes, no, if you have specific feedback. So, I mean, everybody please throw a something in there just so that we can collect that, because I have to write that up.
Well, we have 62 people in Nearpod. We're making progress.
I got it.
Your camera said it did, sorry.
It doesn't apply to elementary. Oh, it does not apply. You're correct. Nope, it doesn't apply to elementary, right? So we have not made any changes. So if you are just an elementary school where it doesn't impact you, correct. It's just high school. I defer to special ed directors, okay? Will seem attainable. And, and that's one of the requirements, right? Like we're supposed to set rigorous goals, but also attainable, right? So, and just a little kind of background too. Silence kills me if anybody knows me. But so when we originally set those targets, back when OSEP made us redo all of our targets and baselines a couple years ago, we put together 3 different models of calculations and really did a huge APR summit and brought everybody to the table and let special ed directors kind of choose which way to go. So being that this was not at resetting everything, it seemed to still fit. So if you list at the table. Perfect. And then you'll be able to capture this, right, Kim? Oh, also and send it to me. Okay, perfect. So, and then just a heads up, we may be having to redo reading. So as we change standards, right, as we make any and all of those, which is why your special ed directors love me and Indicator 3 so much, because our target is constantly on the move, but we have to make those adjustments, right, as assessment makes those adjustments. So depending on exactly what happens with ELA here moving forward, we might have to go ahead and take a look at redoing targets again. So next year. So stay tuned. But and if you do have any, burning questions or anything else, you can always email me too, please. If there's something you want to dig deeper into. We have been working with some of your special ed directors by appointment only and really diving into their assessment data. I think I'm going up to Cash in a couple weeks to work with them. And so, we provide that to them. I do send them to you guys as assessment directors. Right? Like to help them, get into some of that data, non-participation, those participation codes and things like that. So we really are trying to force them to forge that relationship with you guys and that data. So. More LEA since COVID. Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you for engaging in that with us and hope you learned a little. Okay. So on to dynamic learning maps really quick. So this is, I can't see. So as of last week when I had to put my slides together, thank you, you're amazing. This was kind of where we stood with those data points. So I was sitting around 240 kiddos not rostered, which was awesome, right? We have about 4,000 kids that sit in our DLM system that we assess. So we've got most of our kids sitting on rosters. We still had 735 kiddos without first contact surveys completed. And remember, teachers have to complete those and submit them before test slips are delivered. So we've had a total of probably at this point now close to 40,000 testlets. So that would be ELA, math, science, just kind of did a whole average that have been completed by teachers. So we've got some teachers that when that window opened, man, they jumped right on in. We've talked pretty heavily this year about those test information pages, right? And been tracking that. I put that out in all of my training really heavily this year with teachers. So we are kind of looking at that. We're still in a space where, we're still at that about 60% of testlets being delivered. Teachers are not accessing those tips pages, and that is critical because that's the information that they need. Right? It tells them,
and it's required by the standard test administration and testing ethics policy. Not doing that, the teachers are violating testing ethics.
Yep. So, and I hear quite often, I didn't know how to prepare. I didn't know what I needed for getting into the test. Like, this is what that does for you. It tells you whether it's computer administered or teacher administered, how many questions it is, the standard they're being tested on, the linkage level, vocabulary that they can define and not define. So it is really critical that they are accessing. What I recommend to teachers is that when they're sitting and testing, have their teacher computer with Educator Portal open. Right? So as those testlets are refreshing and they're going about, all they have to do is just click on it and look at it, right? And that helps them determine, can we keep moving with testing or do we need to take a pause because I need to go gather materials? Does that make sense? So, so that's really important. So we are tracking that and we'll continue to have those conversations and hopefully we'll start to see those numbers dip down. And then DLM required training. So all of our teachers, before they can even access test management and do testing, they're required to do that training within DLM. So right now, this is really hard to gauge because we may have active or pending teachers in there, right, that aren't testing. Again, back to that cleaning up your accounts, right? If teachers don't need to be in there for DLM, we inactivate them, remove them. We can always bring them back if need be. But I was about 50% of my active teachers or proctors with those roles haven't completed. And some of those, right, have multiple roles, right? Like they have a teacher role and a building role. And so like they may not actually be testing. Does that make sense? So it's kind of hard to really gauge that, but double check that with your teachers.
Question online. Can we, assessment directors, pull that report to the TIPS access?
You should be able to in your data extracts. If you don't see it, and I can't remember, Kim, if I put a data extract slide in here. I've walked you through in several other AD meetings, right, how to get into those data extracts. But in Educator Portal, you should be able to click on that data extracts, right, and go in there and they're broken out by tabs. But you can go look at how many of your teachers have they completed training, not training, right? You can go look at what students are rostered, not rostered, which students don't have first contact surveys still completed. So you can pull all of those too. Is there somebody here in DLM? Nobody's logged in, I was going to say. One of my district people. If you don't see that tips page, let me know, but I think you should have access to that too. Great question. Okay, this one comes up a lot right now, and it comes up every year. This is your reminder if you're using iPads or those Apple devices. If your teachers do not close out of Kite Student Portal, right, that secure browser appropriately, it locks down the entire device. You have to call the DLM service desk. I do not have that. So there is a TA document on that DLM district coordinator's Padlet that you can download and zip it out to your teachers to remind them. So they have to use the actual close Kite button if they do the dots, I think on Macs or Apples or whatever, you've got those dots. If they don't close it the appropriate way, it locks out the device. So just a quick reminder there. Special circumstance codes. So this is starting to come up quite a bit. District test coordinators are the only role that is allowed to do that. So whoever in your LEA has that district test coordinator role. If you do not have one of those, you please need to contact me. So we should have someone in your district, whether it's you as assessment, special ed, somebody, you've designated that role to a coordinator, someone needs to do that. So they enter those special circumstance codes. This is that reminder that in order to enter a special circumstance code, your teachers still have to complete the first contact survey, right, and submit that, because that's how the testlets get delivered, and then you go into that individual testlet and enter that special circumstance codes. So there is an on-demand data extract that you should be able to pull this year, and I don't know if I had another slide on this or not, Kim, but there is also a TA document on that Padlet. I don't know what the next slide is, just go ahead. Oh, there we go. Yeah, see, I'm so good. I forgot what I put in here.
I don't know what's the slides.
So, so there is a TA document on the Padlet that walks you through, and it's just a reminder, the question that I get quite often, and I think my previous TA document needed to be updated, but when you enter that special circumstance code, you have to click that save icon next to it. The blue save button that happens at the bottom of the screen doesn't actually save that, if that makes any sense. So I've updated that TA document for you that you can find on that Padlet there. Again, this is your teacher checklist, right? If you need to take a screenshot, there's also a TA checklist document on the teacher Padlet, right, that they can access. So they, have got to complete training, right? Make sure they get first contact surveys, P&Ps in, checking their rosters. They've got to do all those things before they can start testing. Yours, right? Here's kind of that checklist for you. It still doesn't hurt to go in and double check. Do you need to deactivate or remove teacher accounts still, right? Like I pull that kind of report trying to figure out who hasn't completed training or all those things, right? We have put the onus on you guys to create rosters this year. So make sure you're doing that. I still am very nice, and when I get my small little charter schools that I know are running crazy and teachers email me, I do that for them. But you guys are responsible for that rostering component. And there is, again, a technical assistance document on the coordinator Padlet to walk you through how to create those rosters. I still get, Marina and I are kind of getting inundated with emails. If I'm not seeing Johnny in the system yet, we set that 1% flag. Please remember, it can take 2 to 3 days for that to move from your SIS, right? And depending on when your district, right, submits through UTREX, okay? So it goes from your SIS to us at USBE, and then DLM reaches in and pulls that. So depending on how that all goes, DLM reaches into us about 9 p.m. every night. So if you don't have your loads completed to us before 9 p.m., right, like it's going to take that extra. So so please just kind of give that patience, remind your teachers, your coordinators, whoever's doing this, it can be a couple days to get that in, right, and see that flow all the way through. Okay, and then there's just the links and reminders to your Padlets. There is a district coordinators training that I did in the fall that's on there. And so you can find anything there. If you think there's something missing from that you would like, that would be helpful, please let me know. I'm always willing to add and adjust. And hopefully you don't look like our little doggy dude here. That's how I feel right now. But anyway, so there's my email, Padlets, links. Let me know if you need any assistance with anything. Oh, yes, questions.
Tracy, there's a question. If a student gets opted out by parents, will you enter codes into this platform?
No, you guys do. I do not enter codes, so that is up to you. The only 2 non-participation codes that you need to run by me is if you have students refusing to test, let's talk about that, right? Our window opened March 12th, and you have until the last week of school. It's a long time. Oh, let's talk about that too. So student refuse to test, I like to engage in that conversation just to ensure that we've exhausted all things, right? And then if you have a medical exception, I do require you to submit So kind of unlike RISE or UA Plus, if we've got a medical exemption, you need to submit that exceptional request form, and we look at that. So I get a handful of those every year. There are some students that it is appropriate to exempt from our testing. Participation, let's go back to the participation really quickly. One testlet, and they're considered a participant. Okay, one testlet. It will also produce a score report off of one testlet. So they are considered a participant. They're considered a participant, right, for our indicator 3. We just went through all of that. One testlet. That score report and proficiency may be based upon 3 questions, so not very valid, right? So I tell teachers that keep that in mind. So the more testlets you complete, right, anywhere from 6 to 9 testlets per subject, right, per student. So the more testlets you complete, the more valid that score report becomes. But at one testlet, they're a participant, they count, and you do not have to enter any special codes at that point. So the only time we enter those special circumstance codes is what DLM calls them, right? Our participation codes, is if you've had no testlets completed. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Good questions. Anything else? Okay, all right, we're headed to UC. If you think of anything, email me.
We did.
Oh, we did one more. Okay.
I just had this student opted out. Do we leave the tests that have been completed?
Oh, where's Marine? No. So we have to invalidate those. So here's what I need you to do. That's a great question. Okay, because we need to not produce a score report. So I need you to email me. What do we need, Maureen? Because we have to submit that through the GRF and have them invalidate that on the back end. I need the SSID.
I think SSID.
I think it's the SSID.
Yeah. And then
Because we can find all the other things. And just, tell me that. Exactly, right? Parent opted out. We've got a couple testlets completed so that Maureen and I can put that on our invalidated list so that we don't get score reports. That's a great question.
And I just put your email in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect. Yeah. Good questions. All right, email me if you think of anything else.
Hey, I'm just doing general assessment reminders. We put in our join us in the Great Utah Shakeout, but we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So if you want to shake out, thank you. Oh, way to go. Christine's here. She gave us the thing. Feel free to crawl under something if you need to. But this whole building today is full of people, and we're not having to go outside. So, but there is your reminder. It's at 10:15. I know some of you guys may be crawling under something. It's really cute. The little googly eyes shake. I think it's really funny. So, I mean, at least Sydney and I thought it was hilarious because we literally sent Darren the same meme at the same time. We sent it to him at the exact same time, the googly eye shake. Okay. A real quick thing, just for a reminder, as we are deep in the middle of testing, remember that there is a task calendar. Here is the link. I told you I would provide it for you every month. Here is your tasks, the things that are on here. This will be updated a lot over the summer for next year because we have a lot of changes with assessments and with different systems and all of that. So just be prepared for that. I didn't do a lot of slides. Couple questions that I've been getting a lot of are we're getting lots and lots and lots of requests from parents directly to us requesting parental exclusion forms. And they are allowed to request forms directly from us, but I usually encourage them to reach out to their schools so that you can have a conversation with the parents. But I'm hearing from the parents that the schools are saying, we don't give you the forms, you have to contact the state. That is incorrect information. You have to provide you can use the state form or you can create one which has your own letterhead and stuff on it. But it's really important that you are giving that correct information. Most of the information I'm getting is coming from parents who are contacting Utah Parents United directly, and that's where that information is coming from. So you need to be aware of the fact that they are very aware of the rules. So I have all of the ones that I've received, I've gently just said, you may want to reach out to your school so that gives you a chance to have those important conversations with parents. But I will send them if they request it the second time so just you may want to make sure that you trickle that down. That is really important information to trickle down to your school administrators and your front office people as quickly as possible. And that's those are the two things that I was just going to talk about today. Translation questions, people have finally started submitting all the forms. I appreciate all that information that you've been giving. And we are going to come and observe one school who's doing oral translation for a language other than Spanish on Monday. A quick reminder with Utah Spire Plus, if you're planning on doing the reading test and none of the translation request forms for languages other than Spanish that I've received have requested reading. But if you are doing reading, remember you have to request a paper form, the Human Reader Companion form, so that the translator can translate the reading part, because there is no text to speech. With RISE, there is no reading translation, but with all the other ones, you need to remember that. So just remember that. Everyone's been really good about emailing me questions, and you know, we've been sending out the embedded. We have the embedded instructions that we're sending out as soon as I approve the form. I also include the new embedded scripting instructions that are in RISE and Utah Spire Plus, so the translator's familiar with it before, and that's not necessarily secure. They can translate that ahead of time, but remember there are really strict guidelines about what has to happen. The translator is not the proctor. There has to be at least one other person in the room who is able to just help clarify. They may be sitting right next to the translator to make sure they understand how the system works, how to answer any technical questions, clarifying questions that the translator may have as they're listening to the text to speech, then translating for the student, who then the student enters the information into the test. That's how that works. Now with Spanish adaptive, it's all embedded, but with languages other than text to speech, it's really, other than English, Spanish, it's really important for you to understand that. So those are the main questions that I've been getting. So Maureen, you're up. Roster troubleshoot.
Here I am. All right. So as Kim said, we are right in smack dab in the middle of all of the exciting testing going on right now. So I just have some reminders for you about why you might not see students rostering for your exams. As Tracy said earlier, if you make a change for a student or you newly enroll a student, it can take 24 to 48 hours for those students to make it all the way through the process and get rostered for a test. So nothing happens, government institution, nothing happens automatically, immediately. There's a process. It takes a while. I cannot see that. I can't remember my own slide. Oh, yes. And a lot of you have experienced this week. Student record changes. If you update courses, if you update student records, if a student changes classes, if you have a term change anytime during testing, that can cause a student to drop off a roster. It's usually only for one day. It's very disconcerting. It can happen to an individual student. It can happen to a lot of students, which we've seen happen just this week. We've had whole courses drop off. We've had whole schools drop off. It's a lot. So just you might want to get in touch with your UTREX people and have them just be a little bit cautious when they're updating on the back end student information, because our process is very sensitive to that. And finally, if you make changes in a sort of a vendor platform, if you have to add a Cactus ID to a teacher account, that you're going to have to wait for the nightly upload for students to be attached to those teachers. All right, next slide.
Can I interject with a quick question?
Yes, absolutely.
There's a question for Kim, just really quick. Reading for Spanish does not have to be approved because it is embedded, correct?
Only there is no reading for Spanish for RISE. There is reading for Utah Spire Plus, but only for the directions and the past that has to be translated. We're talking about Utah Spire Plus, and it has to be approved. It's on the form. So,
okay, thank you.
Alrighty, so with my big general things that could cause rostering issues, here are some more specific ones for test. RISE rostering is based on student course enrollment. So obviously fatal UTREX errors. No student who has a fatal UTREX error is going to roster for any assessment. Number one, that's the number one thing to look for. We want to look for a 1% flag being marked. If they are not rostering for ICE, they could be a 1% student. The core codes. Core codes assigned to courses are very important. If they have the wrong one assigned, they aren't going to roster for a test. Or they're going to roster for the wrong test. They're going to roster for a bunch of tests. Always pay attention to the core codes assigned to student courses. And finally, course exit and entry dates. If your course has an exit date, a student's going to drop off. Student's going to drop off a roster.
So, Maureen, can I
Yes.
ask you a question?
Absolutely.
On the core code priority,
Mhm.
we have, well, our case, we had a student that was registered in several math classes until they found the right one he was supposed to be in.
Mhm.
So they've got tests, and I know that I had emailed you, and it took some time, I guess. What's the window for those to drop off usually? Because I have one that the exit date was like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
It should drop off within that 24 to 48 hour period. Unless if you contact me with a problem about rostering and I throw in that sentence, I put in a ticket with our developers.
Okay.
That is going to take a while. Our developers are very busy during this time of
Right.
year, and they have to, if I have to put in a ticket with that, that means they have to go into our database and make manual changes, unfortunately. And those manual changes can take a while.
Okay.
I try to light a fire under them, and they are doing their best.
But they get them all done before the window.
Yes,
closes.
absolutely. And they are very aware of the testing windows, and I remind them all the time.
Those bureaus. Okay.
And Fort Vanu, thank you, Vanu. He does all of our tickets. I'm always in contact with him. He's working off it, I promise. But if I send you that email, just know it's going to get done, but it's going to take a while. That goes for everything. If I tell you the developer is in the email.
Thank you. That helps me tell other people
Yeah,
that are worried
sorry.
about it, so thank you.
Sorry about that. All right, so next slide. For UA plus, our likely suspects, once again, Scram record, those fatal UTREX errors, and instead of course entry and exit dates, we just need to look at school entry and exit dates, and dual enrollment. If a student is enrolled at more than one school, then those type breakers are going to go into effect, and they could just be rostering at another school. All right, so here's another issue that sort of cropped up in the last week or so I thought I'd share it with everybody. I know a lot of people have part-time students, homeschool students, and there are two sets of core codes that can be assigned to courses that seem very generic and very like I could pick either of those. One is called grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6. And one is called grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6 homeroom. So there is a big difference between these two sets of core codes. The grade 3, grade 4, grade 5 with no homeroom, they are for teachers that teach all subjects to a student. If I am the main teacher of a student in 3rd grade and I teach them all the core subjects, English and math is what we test on, and I use that core code, they are going to roster for every test. It's just a quick and easy way. I teach English and math. I'm going to give them an English and math test. They're going to roster. Now, a lot of people have chosen this core code for their homeschool students that they don't teach any core subjects to. Your part-time students that come for orchestra and PE and art, but they don't take any core subjects. You'll want to use the ones in the left-hand column for those, the ones with the 8s. The 8-8 core codes are the ones for those students. They do not roster a student for any assessments at all. That's the one you want to use. So just keep that in mind. Share that with anyone who might need to know. Please use those 88s for the 88 ones for students that don't need to take a test. It will make your life, my life, it will make everybody's lives so much easier. And I have put a link at the bottom of this slide for just the main core code list. If you have interest in it or you need it, share it. That has all the core codes that you can assign to courses.
So I'm going to ask one more question.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
So what if you have a kid that takes math at his brick and mortar and homeschools for the rest?
then then there are individual, like but subject-specific core codes, like grade 3 math. You would enroll them for that.
Okay.
And they are all on those
They're on
core
the
code
list,
lists,
yeah.
and they are on the core code list that we provide for assessment also. They're on the RISE core code lists. They're all there.
Thank
And we
you.
have on our core code list that we published, we have all the ones that register a student for all 3 subjects, math, English, science. They are highlighted on those lists. So don't use the highlighted ones if a student is only taking one subject. Use those subject-specific ones. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide. Just a reminder, WIDA pre-reporting data validation ended Tuesday. You guys can't fix anything anymore, but I have a state data validation that's coming up at the beginning of May, in May. So if you find when you get your reports that there's something amiss, something is wrong with a student, they have 2 reports, just go ahead and email me or Megan the student information, and I can get that fixed during my data validation window. For Utah Aspire Plus, it's May 13th through May 15th. You are in charge of that. You'll just need to make sure all of your participation codes are applied for all your students. You have to account for every single student. Also, same goes for RISE. You got to account for every single student on those with those participation codes. And their window is June 11th to June 12th. If you are applying participation codes as you go, you'll get to these windows and you'll be set. No extra hard work for you.
With the new Atom platform, does it do an automatic submit for absence for Atom?
No.
No,
You
it's
have to-
nothing.
there's
like
nothing
we did
on-
last year.
Yeah.
204 is
no.
the, or 200, sorry, 200 is the only one that's automatically applied. That's for regular participation. Every other code you need to put in.
Except for 103, 104, and 205.
Oh,
If
those-
your SOS
if it's in
system
your
is set
SOS.
correctly for, yeah. Yeah. Everyone invests.
Clearly, I'm not a participation code expert.
One thing for those of you who are aware, like in RISE, some of you have gotten emails from me. One thing I would highly suggest you start reviewing is the use of code 101, which is did not test. Yesterday, I pulled a report, and there are so many students who already have code 101 applied to multiple RISE tests with the window not closing for several weeks. Now, I don't know what's going on. I have been sending those out to LEAs and just saying, you may want to check on this. It may be being input incorrectly by a school administrator, that they thought, oh, we had to test by this date. The student wasn't here. We're not going to do makeup testing. If you remember our ongoing discussions we've been having in the last couple of assessment directors meetings when Malia's come in to talk about the impact that that's having on multiple participation rates, accountability, it's really important to monitor codes like 101 did not test. Now, there are students who basically, if they're just not going to be here for the rest of the school year, then you put in 101. You know that they have officially, whatever. But we're talking about, like, it is weird to see, like this random 101 test early, because why are they just absent? Why are we not pursuing to make up the student? And I understand, by the way, chronic absenteeism and all that. I don't get the same level of reporting for Utah Aspire Plus, but I do see it for RISE, and I pull that report every single week. So just be prepared that you may get an email from me saying, hey, double check this. And, and that's what I look at, so.
All right, and finally, here's our just usual assessment core code lists link and student rostering manual link there. Please, they have so much information. I beg you, please read them. And that is it for me. Always, any questions or concerns, get in touch.
Are there any questions, Emily? Okay.
Not right now.
Okay, we'll do WIDA and then we'll take a break.
All right. You're going to get a break right after me. So your favorite WIDA gal here, constantly on repeat. Sorry. But again, we try to repeat things because we always inevitably get emails, even after the third time we've said it. So please share all information with those pertinent in your LEAs. first of all, as Maureen just said, we just completed on Tuesday our LEA data validation. Don't panic if you missed something. We do it twice for WIDA access. As you get your reports, again, online, so in AMS, those will be coming on May 2nd. And I will send out an email with instructions on how to get those reports. Because as you know, AMS has changed quite a bit this year. If you notice any of those errors, again, send those to myself or Maureen. Please only send SSID numbers, no names. We really, really don't want names because our email is open public record. So student privacy, SSIDs only. So you'll get those reports early May and the printed ones will be shipped to your LEAs. Again, please make sure that you send out those reports to all different stakeholder groups within the 3 weeks per our testing ethics policy. Again, also WIDA alternate access, as you know, that was just redone this year. Those score reports will not be available until this fall. So just be aware of that because the standard setting has to take place this summer. And then we will have further discussions about alternate access, exit, and everything moving forward now that we have that new test. So just stay tuned for updates. Next. Late materials. Please return your materials. If you find something, don't throw it away. Send it back. You will be getting a Megan firm but friendly email. If your LEA does have missing materials, I will say I have the preliminary counts and I want to say there's only about 15 LEAs that have missing materials. The fewest I've ever seen. So bravo to you. But please remember that if you have late materials, it's going to delay your reporting. And here are those reporting dates if you do have late materials. Yes.
Question online. When do we really need to have distribute reports by? Each deadline 5/2, 5/20, and 6/11. Each say that score reports need to be within 3 weeks.
Okay, and that's on the previous one. So this is kind of per your LEA. The rule is 3 weeks. If your LEA, when you get the online reports, if your LEA has the capacity to send those out electronically, then within 3 weeks. If your LEA is reliant on those paper ones, then that's where your 3 weeks will start. So it's what's the capacity of your LEA when your 3 weeks actually starts based on either online or paper. If you, the 6/11, so if there are any updates to those scores, so if you get a student updated score that needed to be fixed, then you, I feel a sneeze coming on, so I apologize.
Don't hold it in.
I know.
Your son will teach you that.
Yeah. This is a very interesting side story. My son, 7-year-old Logan Lopez, held in 3 sneezes and hemorrhaged his eyes this week. So that was exciting. Don't hold in your sneezes. Lesson learned. So if you get reports that are fixed, then again, 3 weeks. So again, this is up to your LEA and the capacity of your LEA in how you do get those reports out to parents and teachers and all stakeholders. Okay. One big thing, and I should have made a slide for this, a huge thank you. And I know Kim is very grateful as well. Plagiarism, way down for the state of Utah. We are so grateful. All plagiarism instances have been reported out. We will not be getting any as we know that our scoring is completed. So don't be looking out for any WIDA plagiarism notices.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think, and I've got all the responses back. Yeah, the last one yesterday.
So we can tell that your efforts within each LEA, they're paying off. So keep up the great work. Again, looking ahead, you know that we announced WIDA access for next year. Here are the dates. And again, the materials update as soon as we nail down that December date, early December date to have, gosh, I really don't want this sneeze to happen.
They're saying look into the light.
Look into the light. Look into the light. Don't go into the light. Oh, good times. So we'll get that December date out to you as soon as we have it determined. We should be nailing down that date within by June. So a couple of screener reminders looking ahead. You can start screening July 1. So that normally helps a lot of LEAs, especially for those incoming kindergarten students. You can get started in July. And then another big thing that was announced in an AD meeting is all the screener administration training courses have been updated, and they will also be available July 1. So you don't have to wait till September anymore when like half of your screening window may be over. So thank you, WIDA. They got feedback. They heard from all states and LEAs. We need these earlier. And then one reminder is a lot of questions that we get about screeners is, can a teacher refer a student to be screened? No. Teacher referrals do not make screening possible. It has to be based on the home language survey. So again, screening only can be based on the home language survey, no teacher referrals. We do have other exciting news in the world of WIDA Screener. I'm not sure when we're going to be able to announce that, but I would say stay tuned, maybe listen in to the APAC meetings or something like that coming up soon, because we have fun screener news heading your way. I have a hard time keeping secrets, if you can't tell.
I know you want to say it.
I do want to say it so
You
bad.
might as well.
Really?
Yeah.
I can?
I didn't know it was a secret.
Well, I thought we had to wait for APAC.
No, the board.
Okay.
People online are saying, just say it.
Just say it.
You won't tell anyone.
Okay. Pinky promise, it stays within this meeting with 107 folks.
And then it goes like,
64 of them are in Nearpod, so there's a whole bunch of people apparently not paying attention.
Okay, so we just got our final approval to house screener data at the state level. It'll be screener when a student was screened and what their screener score was. Oh, already, yay! It'll be housed in the data gateway, and we're hoping to have this go live this fall. We have been working on this for a really long time. We finally, 5 months we've been doing this. We just took it to superintendency, was it last week, and we got the final approval for the process. So yeah, we are beyond excited. This has been a lot of work, and we are so excited. As this rolls out, it's already underway. As it does roll out, we will keep you posted on how this is going to look, but it will be attached to the students in the data gateway. Yay! I feel like it's an early Christmas surprise.
That overlapped exactly with the great shakeout. So that was the same time we're having Thursday.
I know, I caused an earthquake.
I could be good guys, and yeah, that was a lot. We were way ahead of schedule.
So our contact information, of course, do not hesitate to reach out. We are always here to help, support, and assist you, and we love hearing from you. And your emails always just crack us up because you guys always put some pretty cheeky, funny stuff in there too. So you always keep me on my toes in laughing. So keep them coming. And yeah, I think we are now on a break. Go hide under a table, practice covering your head, your heart, and your neck. And then Teresa's going to follow us up with some good old Acadians news.
So what we think, a 10-minute break, so get back together at 10:30?
Okay, we'll get started. Acadians. So just a reminder, June 7th, we have end of year data analysis for Acadians, both within that. You can come and focus on one of those or try and do both during the training if you'd like. Next slide. And then I think Megan brought this up. We send a lot of reminders. This is another reminder. But I have received questions about ALO Digital for people trying to make a decision on what they want their LEA to move to. So here's information to help you make that decision. Next slide. Oh, I stalled long enough. And then we have opened up the selection form. It's been sent out. You also have a link here, and you can see the deadline is May 15th. I think I last looked just a few minutes ago, and we have about 69 responses, which is great. And remember, only one response per LEA. So if you need to talk with people about that and then decide who's going to submit, that would be great. And remember that it's only for Acadians Math. Reading, you have ALO, that's your decision now. So Acadians Math, you're deciding between ADM or ALO. And if you have questions, email me and then I can work with you through those questions.
Or you can just talk.
Oh, okay. I will just talk. Just talk.
Reading on grade level cut scores have now been determined to be at that above benchmark cut score for first, second, and third grade. So Darren talked at the beginning, the board set that score for third grade, and so we decided to follow along with that for the first and second, just for ease of conversation and understanding. So if a student meets or is above that reading on grade level cut score, really is meaning that a student should be able to comprehend and apply higher order thinking skills when reading grade level text. Those benchmark scores are really at risk, how much a student is at risk for future reading difficulties, and that reading on grade level cut score is really thinking about comprehension and those higher order thinking skills. So we will have some new Acadians reading parent letters that will include information about reading on grade level. Those will be provided in April and finalized towards the end of this month, beginning of May, that you can utilize, especially starting next year, because the ALO parent letters do not include information about things that parents can do at home or that the students receiving interventions, which are both things that are required that LEAs provide that information around. So we'll be sending those out when they get finalized. And then we just have some questions about Lexile. So our reading on grade level used to be a Lexile cut score, and now it's just a benchmark composite score cut score. And so we're wondering about Lexiles. Are they being utilized? If they are being utilized by your LEA, how are they being used by either your LEA or teachers? And whether or not we need to continue providing those Lexile scores. So we do pay $1 per student, and we're just wondering if that is money well spent or money that's being wasted. And so we would really appreciate you completing that survey and taking just a minute to provide us that information about the utilization of Lexiles in your LEA.
Do you want them to do it right now?
Yeah, it's like 2 questions.
Okay, and if you go in and complete this, if you're in Nearpod, you can actually just click right on the link. It'll take you right there. If you're in the PowerPoint slides, then you're going to have to open the link and do other work. But in the PowerPoint, you can just click. All 65 of them.
We probably need to make a decision pretty soon. So we'll leave it open for about a week to complete the survey, and then we'll close it out.
There is a question.
Yes.
So this new-ish cut score means that a student in the at benchmark level or green is not prepared for the next grade's reading content. However, the documents explain that green means they are 80 to 90% likely to succeed. In future years, we would like to revisit the cut scores, though we are glad that the reading on grade level system is now more transparent.
Who wants to answer that? I can't answer it.
Yeah, I can just
Go
say,
ahead.
earlier I mentioned a reading study that was underway. That started last September 5th with the Science of Reading expert panel that the board has appointed, a meeting that I attended with them and their interest in re-examining the alignment between our early literacy assessments and in our case, the RISE ELA assessments. That study is scheduled to be completed in August. Those results will be obviously shared publicly, including with our board. And that could trigger additional consideration around that determination, which I think is what I heard, Emily, is there's a request that at some point in the future to re-examine that. And that could certainly happen at that time. Right now, there's nothing on the calendar for the board to bring this reading on grade level determination back to them. So that study is the next related activity and the results from that.
And I think just to clarify, when we're talking about Acadian scores, that well below benchmark and above benchmark cut scores, it's really thinking about the potential risk the student has of future reading difficulties when we're thinking about that ability to fluently read text. So it's those foundational skills of being able to read actual text. And it's not indicating that a student is going to be able to apply higher order thinking skills. It's really looking at that foundational reading skills, because if a student doesn't have that foundational reading skills, obviously comprehending text is going to be extremely difficult for them. So I think there's just a lot of miscommunication about what those benchmark scores really mean and indicate for a student. We have been saying, I guess, to push to blue, because that really cements those foundational skills for students, and we have found a correlation between RISE and proficiency on the RISE assessment in third grade, and then where that falls in relation to a student's benchmark score on Acadians. And those cut scores of that above benchmark line is where we really see a closer correlation between success on the RISE and Acadian scores.
Yeah, and Teresa, one of the things through all this discussion with all the different parties, including I've had the privilege of meeting with some LEA representatives since September, and then our board, obviously, and our teaching and learning team. The Acadians specifically and intentionally doesn't use the phrase reading on grade level. They haven't identified a cut score along their composite, their scale, that they determine that. Our state, much like our board does with standard setting on RISE and UT Aspire Plus, where the board determines we have a process for standard setting, but in reality, that's a policy decision. So even our RISE proficiency cut score, that's a score that is informed by our teachers who come to the standard setting process, but that decision is made at a political level. Sometimes we might forget that. And we think, because there's a number, this proficiency score, what's behind it all? There's processes used typically to determine cut scores, but that's done at the state level. And I think it's noteworthy to recognize that Acadians, who produces that assessment, doesn't make claims that any of their cut scores are reading on grade level.
There is more chatter online. It's a bit confusing because we've got parents and teachers used to seeing that 3 or green is good. And then green means that the student is 80 to 90% likely to succeed with a 10 to 20% risk. And blue means 90 to 99% likely to succeed, a 1 to 10% risk.
Even though I'm with math, I'll speak with the ELA. As far as Acadians and specific to math, but I know they're very similar, those percentages that are being shared are related to success in future benchmarks. So when whoever is using the word succeed, I would maybe clarify that those percentage points are student success on future benchmarks in Acadians.
Which is different than assuming a future success on a college and career readiness standards-oriented assessment for ELA.
Thank you.
It's difficult, and I totally 100% get it, because as a teacher, that was kind of what I thought too. And so I think that this conversation and thinking about what that reading on grade level cut score indicates potential success on our third grade RISE assessment, which is assessing those ELA standards and higher order thinking. But that's where the correlation lies. And so green is good in the fact that the student is less likely to have risk with future reading benchmarks, but it doesn't necessarily correlate to being able to access text at that higher levels. So, and
So will the parent letter be adjusted so that we are not looking at colors but composite scores? And then there's another question after that.
so the ALO's parent letter is definitely still related to color as well as composite scores. The parent letter examples, and these are examples, you are welcome to use them and as they are, or to edit them. The required components are things that parents can do at home with their child, and if your child is receiving interventions. So they are required for students who are below or well below grade level. Benchmark. Thank you.
See how easy that is?
Yes. Below or well below benchmark, it is required for those students. What else you include, we are providing some guidance and information around that reading on grade level cut scores that have currently been designated, but whether you include that or not, that is up to you. It is still color-based in the fact that it helps you see how far maybe your child or how close your child is to that specific cut score. But when we look at the reading on grade level, it's going to reflect very closely to what is the policy manual that Anne Michelle Mill? Accountability, the technical accountability. I was like, I don't remember the name of it. It's not my responsibility, I guess. If you look in that currently has information around that reading on grade level cut scores. And so it's going to be very similar. Obviously, we are adjusting the information within that document to reflect the change, but it will be similar to that. And again, they are sample letters that you can utilize or change however your LEA would like to present that information to parents.
This is a hot topic because the chat's like,
Yes,
there's
not
lots of
surprised.
Will we have a report generated by the state to convey reading on grade level? The AOL reports will not be sharing this information of on grade level information.
So the ALO report does not indicate anything with regards to grade level because as Darren stated, they are not saying what is considered a reading on grade level as far as them. That is something that's been set within our state. And so that's why we are providing letters from USBE that have language around that because it's not included within the ALO specific reports. And as far as the accountability and reports like that, I'm going to turn that to somebody else because that is not my world.
I think right now, the only place that that would be reported will be on the school report card early literacy tile.
Yeah, even there, there is a combined first, second, third grade. That's been typical in the past. Remembering that the third grade reading on grade level has been something that has been part of our ecosystem since at least 2019. What was different over the last calendar year was when the Education Interim Committee required the state board to publish an independent report, not a report that's built into a reporting system, but provide to them at their September meeting a rank order of LEA's reading on grade level, third grade percentage. We're hopeful that that's not requested ever again, to be honest with you. I'm not sure that I could make an argument that there's value to that. I don't think I could do that. But it's up to them. In terms of the statute for children, if I have a first, second, or third grade student and he's reading or she's reading below benchmark, then as an LEA, my teacher has some responsibilities to communicate with me. But in terms of reading on grade level, there's not a statutory requirement for my child's teacher to report to me. I would hope that when I meet with them, I would not only get information about their reading on benchmark status, but also what our overall goal is. And if we go back to the code, it is strenuous statewide goal of 70% of our third grade level students reaching proficiency or reading on grade level. I understand that that's a challenging and difficult goal because it's stated right in the code, which is also part of the justification that our board, as they talked and debated about where that scale score should fall on the Acadian scale score end of year, was to be compliant with that requirement that it's a strenuous statewide goal.
Okay. Keeps growing.
Look through there. Yeah, if there's questions we can address as a group, we want to do that. There might be this dialogue too.
There's a lot of talk of the confusion between the percentages and then what was said about it being related to succeeding in other benchmarks versus grade level. So there's a lot of talk about confusion there. And then there's a comment here. Your previous slide does not refer to future benchmarks. It refers to next grade level. Will students in green need progress monitoring or intervention?
No.
No?
They won't, because remember the code around progress monitoring and notification is specific to below benchmark or well below benchmark. That hasn't changed.
Yeah. And this slide is referencing the reading on grade level cut score and what that means, not what benchmark scores mean. So yes, the reading on grade level cut score has a direct correlation to proficiency on RISE assessments, and that is really being able to apply that higher order thinking skill. So if you look at what it means to get a 3 or B proficient on the RISE assessment, it's referencing that being able to apply higher order thinking skills when reading grade level text. So that's the correlation between the reading on grade level cut score and the reading within the RISE assessment. And there is a lot of confusion about it, and maybe we can discuss as an assessment team what we can do and maybe provide some additional information just to help clarify things for assessment directors, and then you can utilize that however you would like with teachers and parents and board members and everybody else within your LEA. We did a big study session with our board, and it was like, 2.5 hours where we were just kind of discussing the same type of thing and thinking about what does this mean, how are they different, how are they related, and just figuring out the nuances between what benchmark scores mean, and when we look at what that reading on grade level cut score means, and that goal that has been set for 70% of our students in third grade to reach that level.
Yeah, and we obviously need, and it's clear by this discussion here, improved communication tools. I know the Utah Association of Assessment Directors brought a recommendation for improved communication tool last fall, which our team is preparing to deliver. Why don't we we'll make sure that our next assessment directors meeting, we'll try to put more time in for this. There's been a request that I read a comment that's been put in the chat by Hal.
I have it right here, yeah.
Okay, so let me go ahead and read that, and then we'll move on to the next session, or the next item on today's agenda, but we'll come back and visit this in May. This is from Canyon School District Assessment Director Hal Sanderson. In my opinion, parents see this in a more simple, common sense matter. Can my student read typical material in this grade level? Policymakers who stray from this create a problem of messaging and understanding. Quite a few of you that agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Please still complete the survey about the Lexile stuff. I feel like that might have gotten forgotten in the discussion. So we still would really appreciate that input as to if and how Lexiles are used.
And this is the slide, this is the survey, you can link right to it.
If you're in the Nearpod, which I just put in the chat again.
We have 68 people in the Nearpod.
And then I just wanted to give a shout out to the following LEAs. We're having all of their elementary schools above 90% for progress monitoring fidelity. So we had a number of charter schools that some of them have just one campus and some have more than one campus. And then we had actually 5 LEAs with all of their elementary schools above 90% progress monitoring fidelity for their well below benchmarks students. So just congratulations and thank you. It really does make a difference. So then utilizing that progress monitoring data is the next step, but if you don't actually collect it, then you don't have any data to utilize. So the next slide. And then just an overall to the state, a really big increase in those that had above 90% starting when I looked at it last fall compared to this spring. So an 11% increase or 10% increase, no, 11% increase. And then the below 50% also dropped. So we are definitely heading in a much better trajectory. And like last year when I collected data, I looked at below 20%. And the fact that now we only have 11% below 50% is really great gains. And kudos to you and your schools for putting things into place to ensure that progress monitoring is happening. And now KEEP assessment. So just a reminder that it is required this year for spring administration. I've had a number of LAs who've reached out to ask that question. So it is the required kindergarten assessment for this year, and then optional starting in next school year, 24-25. And reminder again, no calendar days for K assessments moving forward. They are receiving the same assessments as other students. And so we're not providing any specific calendar days for them. So should have the same calendar as everybody else. The window for this year is that last 4 weeks of kindergarten, and then data is due in the data gateway by June 15th. And then PEEP. So the PEEP exit, that assessment window is the last 4 weeks of preschool, which for some LEAs starts next week. And that data is also due in the data gateway by June 15th. Is there a question?
Where kindergarten will be doing Acadians next year, is there an alternate Acadians rubric for kindergarten to replace the KEEP? To Tracy and Kumar.
Yeah, we are currently in discussions about that, so that information will be coming out. We have not made any final decisions about what that's going to look like, but something will be provided for both Acadians reading and Acadians math for kindergarten. And then the revised PEEP entry will be used for the 24-25 school year. Some questions are are being removed. We have a couple of questions that are being added. We are currently working on that revision process. We're going to be piloting with some students this spring just to make sure that everything is running smoothly. The ELA standards were all updated. We did have some changes because of changes within the standards as well. And we are working on aligning that to the PEEP exit and to include a student and program growth component from the entry to the exit, which I know is something that people have really been wanting, and now it's in legislation. And so we are working on revising that. So that's a big reason why we are doing such a large revision versus just changing and updating the ELA standards. So materials will be available for download by July 15th from the assessment page. And USBE will not be providing any materials, so they will need to be downloaded by your schools and programs that are using it. And then we will have some PEEP entry trainings for next year. So the PEEP entry Canvas course will be available July 15th. And then there are 3 virtual trainings. Sorry, I honestly could not fit more into my schedule with all the trainings I'm doing for ALO. So I looked at it and was like, oh, I do need this. So some of them are in July and then in August, or you can have your staff just take that Canvas course. But it is important because there are some definite changes to that assessment that are different. And so we really do need to make sure that staff are trained on that new assessment and what those questions are and how to administer them.
Okay, I have Tracy Gooley on speakerphone to answer the question in the chat about the Acadians. Okay, you're on speaker, Tracy.
Okay. So, you're most likely going to can you hear me?
Yes.
We don't know if
Okay.
we don't know if
Can you
it's
hear
on the
the chat?
speaker.
Can you say in the chat if y'all can hear Tracy?
So
Yes.
what we're going to do is most likely the case alternate right now is really going to become the Acacian kindergarten, because when we created the key, we used a good majority of all of the essential elements at that point. So we'll just end up having to create like the scoring rubric and stuff. So that is most likely what will happen. But it will be the same rubric as what is for first and third grade, if that makes sense.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Thanks, Tracy.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys.
And then just if you do need PEEP personnel to register for MIDAS, so if you have your preschool teachers or anybody that's registering for ALO training for educators who don't have a Cactus ID and a MIDAS account currently because they've never used it, this is information on how to do that. And you do not have to have a Cactus ID to get that login and then be able to register for courses. Okay.
Questions.
Are there any other questions?
There's a question about the same, clarifying on Tracy's using the same rubric, and I was just looking, because she said the same rubric as the KEEP, and then she said the same rubric as first.
I know, and I think we're gonna just have to have some discussion and it will be provided.
It will be similar to the rubric either for KEEP or Acadian
Yes.
or second, third, something similar to one of those.
Yeah, I think it's gonna kind of be a combination to just make sure it's aligned.
Okay, just a reminder for RISE, for accommodations, the state level requests need to continue to be entered in TIDE. And, you know, of course, we always ask for a few weeks, but I know we're at a point where that's not possible. But just try to get those requests entered as soon as possible to give me a few days to ensure that they're processed, especially because so many of them I'm having to go back and email the person who submitted it, because I can just tell by the description there was an error in their request and I need clarification. So sometimes just with that communication exchange, that delays. But when I see requests within 24 and 48 hours of the testing, that just kind of puts the student in a predicament. We want to make certain that those settings are there so they don't have a disruptive testing session. But all of that information is outlined in the TIDE user guide to submit those state level requests and just make certain that you are reviewing those settings. We've had a good chunk of instances of incorrect accommodations. And that's just not a good experience for the student ultimately. Like we know as humans and adults, we make errors. But really consider what your checks are in your LEA to ensure that accommodations are accurate before a student starts testing. Or if you do know an error, it's best if that student's test is paused and we correct that before any submission. It's just an easier process to fix it.
All right, couple of things with functionality and RISE. First, the testing tickets currently are going to print for every student. I put this in the AD memo last week, but wanted to highlight it here as well. This includes your students who have the 204 parental exclusion code, which if it's been applied prior to testing in the past, we believe that functionality has been where the testing ticket wouldn't generate. It is currently generating, so I wanted you to be aware of that so that you could pull those out. If that's been your practice in the past, if that's something you've relied on, be aware of that. Also, for our schools who are participating in remote administration, the secondary Math 1 assessment is also not available for remote, similar to science. Those ones will need to be done in person. So hopefully that's not a heavy lift for you. It doesn't affect too many of our students, as we know that it's secondary Math 1 only specifically, as well as only for remote. They can still take that test in person. It's just that test along with science are not available with the remote functionality within the RISE system. The second thing I wanted to hit on with RISE was just a reminder to manage your test appeals, because approving or rejecting these test appeals is a two-step process. So administrators and other people in your schools can create those appeals, but as an LEA level user, your job is to then go in and review them, reject them or accept them or delete them, depending on what you see. And I would also recommend when you're looking at those to double check there's a little information, like a little comment box, and you can see why the appeal is being created, which then just provides you with a little more information, which that way you can reach out to the school if you need more information to support that appeal, or if it is providing enough, you can go ahead and do those. I do go in and check these usually about Wednesdays and Fridays. I go in and check just to make sure you're keeping on top of them and sending little reminders if there's a couple that are hanging out. Those friendly but firm ones, like Megan.
So Lisa, can I ask you a quick question back on that 204? So once we had the 204 participation code, the student wasn't even allowed to sign in. So if they have a ticket.
So it will still keep them from signing in. Like they will not let them sign in, but the test ticket is.
So it's like, why do I have test ticket?
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. So you can rest assured they won't be able to access the test, but the testing ticket is going to print.
Yes.
Where we believe it wasn't doing that before.
We're checking on.
Yeah, we're checking. It's one of those things we're like, oh, this is in fact happening. So we're going to look more into it.
Oops, sorry, I clicked it twice.
Oh, you're fine. So this is just your reminder that also when we're creating those, it's that two-step process where you have to go in and make sure that you are either accepting, rejecting, and then you process those appeals. Okay. There's more guidance in the TIDE guide, obviously, if you need it, but that's just your friendly reminder to stay on top of them as we're now in the thick of testing and you're going to start to see those test appeals come in. Yes.
There is a question online. Secondary Math 1, would that be 8th grade math? I'm not sure of the coding.
Math grade 8 is its own test.
Taking secondary math 1.
Yes, but 8th graders taking secondary Math 1 would be effective.
Yeah, many of you might not have secondary Math 1 as an option. It would take some kind of an advanced math track that you have set up in your curriculum delivery or scheduling system. So for a lot of you who hear that mentioned, you wouldn't make sense because you're not offering secondary Math 1 to 8th grade students.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
As far as other end of testing guidance for RISE,
The window for testing for your students does close June 7th, and all of your cleanup should be completed June 12th, close of business there. I've also included just some really quick kind of one-stop shop page numbers here for you regarding your data cleanup in the RISE Tide Guide. So there's your guidance for monitoring the test progress, participation codes, appeal requests. As a reminder with this one, because it was new last year, there is a bulk upload option now for participation codes that was new last year. I provided guidance in our AD memo, AD meeting, I believe it was last April with that. And then also in the RISE training that we had in January, that was provided as well. But if you have questions or need more clarification, just let me know. Also, the next slide includes the information just for myself as well as the RISE Help Desk. Remember, feel free to reach out at any time. It's super, super helpful if, especially when you are in the testing moment, if something occurs or it was unexpected, if you reach out straight away rather than waiting until 2:30 in the afternoon when your kids are gone. I understand that when you're in the moment, you don't always think about it, and it's at the end of the day when you're wrapping things up and then you're reaching out with questions or issues that you may have experienced. But if you reach out in the moment, it's a lot easier for both myself and for the RISE Help Desk to do some troubleshooting with you and to provide you with the help that you need.
Which is why that 2-proctor thing is really, really helpful. That's when your roving proctor steps in and helps monitor the students, and then somebody can take care of the technical issue. So, UA Plus thing has decided not to show up. I have no idea. It's a total mystery. It was there yesterday. I have no idea. The black box says UA
Black box.
It doesn't like it on any of them.
It's like deleted all of it. Welcome to Google Slides and Etherpad. So.
Okay, so for Utah Aspire Plus accommodations, a nuance that we added to the most recent version of the test administration manual that was uploaded on April 2nd was that when accommodations are entered into ADAM, they load at the top of every hour. So if you enter a student's accommodations at 8:15 in the morning, don't expect it to show up until around 9 o'clock. If you do not have time to wait, and there are a couple of students, then you can reach out to Pearson for assistance to push a load sooner than that so the student can start testing sooner. But I would say if you have numerous students, then that might not be a helpful timing response. It might just be better to wait to the next top of the hour. Reminder to place additional orders into the ADAM system so that you can ensure they're delivered on time for the students' testing. And just refer to the test administration manual for guidance, particularly when requesting state-approved accommodations. It walks through in the test administration manual how to do that with some screenshots.
All right, we're going to play a little game. Yay! I want you to look at these two screenshots, and I need you to spot the difference. It's tiny, but I really need you to find it.
I said that this forever yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got it.
It took me a while.
Yay! People dropping them in the chat. Right. Yes. There are two ADAM websites. One is adamexam.com and one is ltr.adamexam.com. And for the state of Utah, if you want your teachers to be able to proctor tests, they really need to use the LTR one, or it's not going to work. And there will be frustration. In fact, with the Pearson Help Desk this week, there were definitely double digits and not the low kind. Of users calling in saying that their proctor codes aren't working, and this was the culprit. I mentioned it in AD meeting last month, and I've put it in AD memos, so please continue to message. They need to ensure they're using the correct URL, or things are going to be a little bit rough. The next slide actually shows you examples of what you will see. You want to be on the green side. If you are entering the LTR one correctly, you are going to see either the option to create the proctor code in real time, which is what you would be doing if you are using the unassigned proctor group code for your teachers, or if you chose to create those proctor groups and you have given every single individual proctor a different test code, they will see the option to just confirm the proctor group that you've created for them. If they are seeing the screen on the right outlined in red that says that there's an error, they're on the wrong URL. Like, that's just all there is to it. So that's an also easy way, if someone reaches out to you with that error, please go ahead and redirect them. It will be a lot easier for all of us. Okay?
Brad's asking if you can put the proper.
It was on that slide, Brad.
Right above.
Right at the top, in nice bold black letters. LTR.adamexam, all one word, .com. Thank you, Kendra. So as far as where the non-LTR site is coming from, Hal, if you just go and start to type Adam in your URL bar up at the top of pretty much any browser, it's going to show up. So make sure that they are using a direct link rather than
And Adam is being used by multiple, Adam is not a Utah specific, it's not a Utah specific platform, everyone. It is being used by multiple states for different purposes. So the LTR adamexam.com is really important. So.
Yeah, one of the things, Adam, not Adam, the system, but Adam, and I've been talking about as you've been talking, is your IT department might have the capability to go in and set a redirect on that URL, the one that you don't want people using. So that if somebody tries to hit that, either block it so that it's not accessible, which is just better than getting an error that they don't know what to do with. But if you could have a redirect, that might be another way to limit the number of problems that you encounter.
All right, go ahead and go to the next slide. Couple of other things that we wanted to make you aware of. This has also been in the AD memo, but students with multiple enrollments, remember that with Adam, well, and even many, if not all of our testing systems, we don't manually roster. It's not allowable, okay? So just know that you can't just add a student. However, students are now permitted to test with other schools that they're associated with, and it does not require a records transfer anymore. With Pearson Access Next, you had to submit the records request and then wait for the school to accept it or reject it and pass that over. You don't have to do that anymore. Similar to RISE, schools that students are associated with in any way can appear for testing as long as they have their correct spelling of their name and their SSID. They'll be able to test, okay? However, there is a nuance here that is required in that the schools that they are rostered with initially need to leave them in an unassigned proctor group. You can't move that student with multiple enrollments who isn't going to test with you into a proctor group. I don't know that you want to anyway if they're not going to test with you, but you need to leave them in the unassigned proctor group, and that will allow their other school to still test them with another proctor group that they're being associated with. Okay, you just want to make sure in those situations. Sorry, what?
Any block they can put on that so that you can't do that? Kind of help that out.
I can sure ask.
It seems like that could.
I can sure ask, but it does make it so that that record request doesn't have to happen. Similar with RISE, it makes it easier on you and the student, but it does create flexibility that you didn't previously have, which can sometimes also have unintended consequences.
So if they put one in a proctor group, like they just said, I'm creating them before they really knew the system, or they did an error, what's the fix?
So if they put them in the proctor group, you would just have to communicate with that school to just remove them. They just go and remove the kiddo, and that automatically bumps them back to the unassigned, and then they become available for any other school they're associated with to pull them.
Thanks, Lois.
Yep. Just make sure if you are seeing these students testing with a school that they are not initially rostered with, but still associated with, but not rostering with, the communication between the schools is just kind of that big requirement there. And know that reporting is only available with who they are originally rostered with. the reporting isn't going to be available to the school they went and took the test in unless that's where they were rostered to. Okay. Some end of testing guidance for Utah Aspire Plus. The window closes May 10th, so we've got about 3-ish weeks left. I have also included just some really quick one-stop shops here in the TAM as well as the reporting guide for guidance on how to monitor testing activity, enter the participation codes, things like that. And we're actually going to look at monitoring test activity today because this functionality was not available in ADAM when I did the initial training in January. So I wanted to hit on a little bit here just at a high level so that you have an idea. Although many of you, if you're already in the thick of testing, you've been messing with this and you can see it already and you've had questions and that's great. But we're going to hit on it really quick. So when you log into ADAM, you will notice that on the left side there is a reporting option that has a drop down. The first thing we're going to look at is the progress. With that, you can then filter the test and the school, and it's just going to give you overall numbers of completion at that point. Below there, the orgs that you're associated with, so all of your schools will also appear individually down below. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, this is on just what I was talking about. Your schools show up below all of those numbers, okay? Below progress, though, when you go back out to that reporting menu, it will take you next to activity. And there you can view what is happening today, as well as set a specific date range, okay? It will populate a bar graph for you. Down below that bar graph, go ahead and go to the next slide, you can also kind of view by test or by sessions as well as by any orgs that you are associated with. Okay.
Elise, can you clarify what new means and submitted?
New meaning started.
It just says new?
Yeah, it's what it is. They started, yes.
So that is not necessarily started today. That's all tests started.
All tests started.
Thank you.
It will, I believe it defaults to the today, but then you can change your little calendar to filter out. Okay. Below activity, I'm going to skip the report assets, but just know that's actually where you can go and find your archived Utah Aspire Plus reporting from years past is in that report assets option. Below that is the performance, where you are going to then be presented with each individual content test. You will see breakdowns of scores. From there, you can toggle between different screens. Go ahead and go to the next slide. You can toggle between the performance summary as well as student performance. Okay. Up at the top, I've also highlighted the program report that can be generated. And then down below is the performance comparison. The performance comparison will allow you to see how students performed as a whole, or you can use the filters to export specific data that you're looking for. These are the things that are also, this performance tab is the one that's also provided for your teachers if they want to log in and see student level data with the students who are associated with them on rosters, which is reporting availability that they have never had with Utah Aspire Plus before, so that's kind of cool. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The performance comparison that I hit on there at the bottom, it provides information where you can either see student performance across schools. It also is going to include the percent and count of students that are involved in each of your proficiency levels, okay? So you as LEA directors will be able to see your district as a whole. You can also drill down to your individual schools. You can also drill down to individual teachers if you wanted to, or an individual student. Your school administrators can see their school, their teachers, their students. Your teachers can see their students only, okay? Just that hierarchical way of reporting, okay? Go ahead and go to the next slide. When you select the show score groups as a table checkbox, you are going to get even more information on the number and percent of each students who fall within each score range, Okay. And then the little kebab menu there, that's the 3 dots stacked on top of each other. That's where you can drill down with your district or your school or your teachers for individual performance at like the student level. Okay. If you want to see reports at a class level, go ahead and go to the next slide. There's a way to filter the class. Up in that little drop-down box, you can type in the class that you are looking for specifically. So this is really good if you are one of our LEA level users who wears multiple hats, and maybe you have a class specific to you as well as a teacher. You can put your class in there to then just kind of filter out the students that you are working with specifically. If you are one of those users who has the permissions to see more than you really want to at that point in time, okay? When it comes to standard performance as well, you'll still go to the reporting option with performance, and then you just select the test that you want to view the standard performance for. So if you're looking for standard performance for English for grade 10, make sure that that's the one that you select. And that performance summary, again, I showed you this before, but you're going to toggle between either performance summary or standards performance. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So when you click on standards performance, it will take you to, go to the next one, this little screen here, where you can see all of the standards that were associated with that particular assessment, as well as their performance percentage. And then there's other tabs that I've kind of highlighted here with the little red boxes, where you can change the views by toggling between those tabs. So there's the standards details, or there's the standards performance comparison. You can look at them by the ones that are aligned only, or you can look hierarchically, okay, with the performance percentages showing up on the right-hand side. Looking at the chat now for a minute. In test management, can I look by school? It isn't in my filter options. No, I don't believe you can in test management, Hal. But I can gladly ask for that to possibly be a feature. I can't say that. When it comes to help with Pearson, the next slide has the contact information for the Pearson support desk. I crossed out the 4 p.m. because during testing window that actually extends to 7 p.m. I've also included the office hours that we have been holding weekly, where you can get one-on-one or like 4-on-1 attention.
Or 6-on-1.
Yeah, or 6-on-1 with any questions you have. And I don't know, Steve Davis and Christine can probably speak to if it's been helpful for them. We've had a few drop in, but I feel like it's been really valuable to be able to get your more nuanced questions addressed. Yay, Steve's giving me a thumbs up in the chat. Good. It's been helpful. Christine gives me 2 in person. But don't hesitate to reach out with your questions or concerns with Adam, especially because we know it's new. It's new for all of us, and there are little nuanced things that we're learning pretty much on the fly, which is kind of fun. Overall, I have been super happy with how it's gone. It's not been without its flaws. It's not been without some hiccups here and there, but I feel like it's gone as smoothly as it could. And at the same time, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback as well that overall the Adam system has been far more favorable to Pearson Access Next. So that's good as well. The next little bit I have for you is just a little quiz regarding reporting. I've had some people ask when they have to do ISRs, can they save them for when there's parent-teacher conferences, those types of things. So you're going to have a little question here to answer. When are LEAs required to provide individual student reports for statewide assessments with students' families?
And you only have 3 minutes to answer this question. So for somebody wanting to get logged into Nearpod, go find the answer in 3 minutes.
I'll go ahead and try to find the link again to drop it in there. Oh, yeah.
Somebody else jumped into Nearpod. They want to answer the question. There you go, people. 61% of you have not answered. Now, some of that could be USP. Come on.
More secrets to reveal?
I don't know.
So I have people are still answering the least. So if I am in this performance report and it says test progress for like grade 10 English, it says 80% scored. Is that 80% of all the tests that have been issued to students, or is that?
I believe it's 80% of what you have like rostered and registered for
So that's
tests. If I
rostered.
understand it correctly, that's going to be, again, 80% of what is currently scored. So students who are testing right now are not going to,
So, but it is my roster of students.
I believe it's your rostered students. I can get clarification though.
Al says option E depends on when the vendor posts the reports.
It does, no, because once you get your report. Sorry, wrong answer. There is no E. You got 35 seconds to finish. We're in the last like 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Oh, more people joined Nearpod to answer. Thank you, guys. Okay, ready? Here is the answer.
You want to be sure that you are providing ISRs no more than 3 weeks after your LEA testing window closes. Now, David drops a decent argument in the chat in that it's not the testing window, but receiving the scores. Well, where RISE is immediate, unless your window's going through June 10th, you can provide them earlier. Utah Aspire Plus also, they're in there. Now your ISRs individually are not available until May 29th, but that is also just a couple of weeks after the May 10th window closes. So the scores are there. Again, though, your ISRs will be available for you May 29th for distribution that way if you're choosing to
And
use
then
the full
3
ISR.
weeks.
Yep.
So once
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last bit I have for you is actually a collaboration board, and this came from a couple of questions from LEA users in the field. So this is helping some of our newer assessment directors get some ideas from those of you who have a lot more expertise and experience. So in the space below, please share how you provide these statewide assessment results to parents. What suggestions do you have for LEAs to help that process run smoothly or to get that information shared? Kim Howell is asking, when are DLM reports final and posted? I don't know DLM.
I think they come out later, but once the reports are given to you, whenever that date is, you have 3 weeks to give them. So basically that's how that works. And I think it's in the summer. I would have to go back and look at Tracy's slides, but that information I think is in Tracy's slides and in her Padlet, like when they're provided. So, and you were always welcome to send her an email. She had to go to another meeting, so she's not here. And remember, for those of you who are seeing like that's what we do, feel free to just click on the little heart if you need to. You don't have to, everybody doesn't have to type, but we have lots of people who do.
And if you were one of the LEA users who reached out with this question to me and I told you that I would be happy to ask it in our assessment director meeting for you, take your notes, get some screenshots here. Here are your ideas.
I also will share this with Elisa and we can kind of give you the high level stuff. We'll put it in the AD memo. So.
When you are done with your collaborative board, I am done and it can be Scott's turn.
Yay.
You have a whole half an hour.
It's amazing.
We never get a whole half an hour.
It's a whole half an hour, and I might need it because instead of 2 or 3 slides today, I think I have 7. Whoa.
You don't have to talk super fast though.
I can take my time, not tongue tie myself. It should work out really well. And testing ends tomorrow. The 3rd testing event ends officially tomorrow, April 19th. Just want to thank everyone for your help making this one of the most successful ACT testing sessions we've ever had. It says 34,000 because that was the count when I made my slides. It's now 41,356 students tested as of yesterday, and our contract calls for 42,000. So we're inching that number up, which I like seeing that. And so that, really interesting seeing that. We've had a record reduction in the number of testing irregularities. Just almost unheard of in terms of what's been happening there.
Isn't that because we've gone to so much online testing as well?
Yes, online's been helping that a lot because usually the most common testing irregularity is students getting the wrong paper test. And with the massive reduction in paper testing, that's helped a lot with our students and testing irregularities. We've also had a very, very, very low number of help desk calls. I look at and the list has been pretty simple things to call about that they've been able to help out with for the most part. And so that's also been very interesting because you sit there, we get reports every week on calls to the help desk, and I expect to open that report and see a long, long list like poor Elise has been seeing on UA Plus, and it's, here was 4 calls last week. Okay, 4, not bad. They'll take that. Final score reports, one of the districts contacted me, said 14 days after the window closed, they had students already getting their scores in MyACT. 14 days to get those reports back. That is definitely a record because they promised 3 to 8 weeks. And we've had some people who haven't gotten all of their scores, especially people who've tested on paper. But remember, it is 3 to 8 weeks to get those scores back. So just be patient. After 8 weeks, then you contact ACT and say, hey, what's the dealio? And hopefully they can fix it. So thanks again, everyone. This has been weird because the number of phone calls and emails that have come in have been like listening to crickets out on a nice summer night. So just appreciate everyone's hard work, especially as we've moved to the new ACT Now computer system. So speaking about ACT Now, one of the things that helps a lot is feedback to our vendor about ACT Now. You may remember in the beginning of the year, we had some feedback that it's nice to be able to toggle to TCM. It'd be really nice to toggle back from TCM to ACT Now. And within weeks, ACT had that set up. And that was nice because they do listen to the feedback. And so in the space, any enhancements, any changes you'd like to see, any feedback, anything positive or negative you'd like us to forward on to ACT, I've spoken with them and they are eager to get this information back, not just for our Utah contract, but across the nation. I was speaking to some of the national leaders at ACT. They really want to know anything that you can tell them that can improve the system and make it so that it's even more user-friendly than it is. And so we'll give you a few minutes here to just pop any feedback you can give us there for that.
While you're thinking about that, Scott, I'll just add in some of our group may attend to business news, and you might have noticed that ACT was acquired by a different group, ownership group.
I got a slide coming up on that one. Yeah, ACT got purchased. So that's coming up.
Well, that's a positive comment.
Yeah. I've had feedback like this first one several times on phone calls and on emails, just because it has been so much easier to use. And I just remember using Pearson Access Next back when I was doing high school tests going, ugh. And so this has definitely been a better thing. It's just, boy, that doesn't happen often. I don't think it's ever happened. And remember, at any time in the future, you think of anything that you think would be an enhancement or something we can do to make this platform better, I'm happy to forward that up the chain and feed that to ACT. Like I said, they've been very responsive to your feedback. They were very responsive to those of you who participated in our ACT Now pilot session, where we got a chance to at least go in and try the session. Your feedback helped make a lot of positive changes before it went live here in Utah. And I for myself, have been liking it a lot, especially when I get an email about a student or about a school. It's been really easy for me to go in and change permissions or give permissions and look up students or look up how things are said, and even just to talk people through how to use the system. Well, I need to delete a student off the roster. Well, click here, say, yes, I agree, they're gone, and they're gone. It's just a couple of clicks, which Kim loves, right? Kim loves it. The less you can click, the better. Definitely love that.
Got rid of the why click 11, why click once when you can click 11.
11, yeah. And I too appreciate that same thing. It's really nice. Awesome. Yeah, I know. I took the ACT back in 1984, and it was a long wait back in them days to get your test back. Very long wait. Yeah, yeah.
2000, it was a long way.
Yeah, I will admit we didn't have things like FedEx back in those days. It was rough. Yeah, you win. Yeah, been around a while. Well, thanks a lot for that feedback. We do appreciate it. Like I said, anytime, anything you can, anything you want to have me feed up the chain to ACT, please just reach out at any time. You've got my number, you've got my email, and I'm more than happy to do that as I meet with them weekly about improvements and things with the system. Coming up, there is an ACT comparability study we wanted to talk to you about. ACT is looking to reduce the length of the test by shortening the time it takes to take each section, but also shortening the number of items in each section. So they want to do a comparability study looking at the regular length test versus the new version of the test, but also looking at paper versus online so they can show that it doesn't, they want to show that it's still online is still slightly a little bit better, and that even works with the new test. And so they're looking for districts in Utah and schools in Utah, if you're big enough, to participate in this study for your seniors in October. So between the October 21st and 25th, if you're selected, if you want to, first off, participate, and you get selected by ACT, any seniors in your school that want a free ACT test can get one. But you just have to set it up and proctor it in your school. They won't even know until they walk into the classroom if they're getting a paper or an online test. But ACT will work with the schools to set that all up. For one day, you pick the day, anywhere between October 21st and 25th, and they get a free test, and those tests get free reporting to any 4 colleges that they want to report to. And so, nice little deal for your seniors if they want to have a retake. And we know from our past data that retake scores in Utah last year at least went up from a 19 to a 24. Oh. And that, like we said, represents a lot of money in terms of scholarships alone, right? And so it's a free opportunity. They get the same feedback through their MyACT. It's using the ACT Now system, which we currently have here in Utah. And in your feedback, you'll be giving an estimated number to them of how many students you think will want to participate in that. And so if we go to the next slide, I actually have a survey here if you're interested. So if you're interested, please complete the survey. You'll give me your information, how many schools will be participating, who the contact person is for that. ACT will review that information next week when I close the survey down in exactly a week from now. So next Thursday when I close the survey down, I'll give them all the selected schools in that survey, and they'll contact you if you're selected to participate in the study. So any questions on that one? That was a lot.
And you can click on the link right now if you're already interested.
Yeah.
Nearpod.
Yeah, if you're in Nearpod, you can definitely click the link. If you're not in Nearpod, you got to type it out by hand, right?
There's a question, do all seniors participate?
All seniors can participate if they want, right? I mean, there's always, seniors can say no. They can say, I don't want to test. Parents can say, no, I don't want my kid to take the test again. How dare they want to get even more testing information for my kid? But it's a great opportunity, like I said, a free retake essentially to improve scores. If you're using Schmoop on top of that, you've got a great opportunity to get them brushed up and ready for the test. Because it's not like they're going to test like October 30, August 30th, or even September 5th. It's something that can happen in the future.
Will accommodations be available?
Should be, yes. Accommodation should be part of it also.
Scott, the ACT will determine who gets to participate from this pool of LEAs.
Yeah, they're looking to make sure they get a robust sized pool of participants. So it could be they pick three big districts, or they could pick dozens of charter schools. But it's up to them based on how many they need to get, how many students.
It's in our understanding if you're select, I'm an LEA that's fit and they select me, it'll be full school populations that are eligible.
Yep. Full high school, any of your seniors within that LEA, yeah, are eligible for that. And so, cool. We heard about the study. My knee-jerk reaction was, no, you guys are too busy. But then I thought about our students and, okay, do we do it? We try to do what's good for students. And I mean, if I had a senior still in school, my kids are all out of school, but if I had a chance for them to retake the test, I had to pay for my son's. He retook it. He jumped his score up a lot. I would have loved that opportunity for my student, right, for my own kids. And so figure put it out there, and you can choose if you want to participate or not. And then ACT will be the ones doing the final selection based on the interests that we have here. Cool. Next year's training dates. These I don't think are on our document because these are relatively new, and you'll notice some difference in the titles. Accommodation training, the title hasn't changed because it's still accommodations training. But instead of having paper versus online training, we have pre-test administration training on November 11th. I don't know if I'll make that. That's my wedding anniversary. Woo! December 12th, we have test day activities training, and then post-test administration training, which has to do with post-test things along with scoring and reports. And so we spread that out to cover all three gamuts on that. And those should still be online on Zoom. That will run from a Zoom here at USB, so we can have it recorded and be posted. Because we like having those, and we get a lot of people actually looking at those recordings afterward. And I even look at them. I go back and go, I don't know, I should look at the recording, and I pop them up. So those are coming up. It's kind of a big deal. So you heard from Darren, ACT has engaged with the new partner. They announced this officially April 10th. I heard about it April 3rd. I got a little heads up April 3rd about it, but I was told not to tell anyone. They said I signed a non-disclosure agreement. Don't tell them I haven't, but I still didn't disclose it. Next is Capital Management. It's an interesting company. It's a big capital group that owns a lot of really eclectic kind of companies. They own a food brokerage that my wife used to work for years ago. They own FTD Flowers. They own a chemical company. They own an aerospace company. They own Pearson Curriculum Company. Pearson Curriculum. And now they own ACT. And so this is moving them from being a nonprofit, even though they keep talking about how they'll still have a nonprofit section, to a public benefit corporation, which is a for-profit corporation. So AT sees these. Now they keep saying there'll be no changes. I know that when my wife's food brokerage got taken over by them, there were changes, including her layoff. And so, it's okay, because she got a much better job making about $25,000 more a year. It was really cool. And I've been begging her to quit for years.
Coffee now.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, no free coffee anymore. Sorry. But same contract for us. It's the same personnel. It's the same product. It's the same software. And we'll see after this first quarter when the new board takes control, if any changes do come down the pike later on. But for now, everything's going to stay the same. Nothing's moving. And so.
Yeah, you've got it on here, Scott. I just been trained to really emphasize this, that the same contract. So a lot of times people in the public will question when let's take our CAI contract amendment that went through the board this last month. There was discussion about, well, this company owns this service, and so they start to get concerned that somehow there's conflation of what products they're going to get, and regardless of who owns ACT, a contract that was previously established, it creates the conditions for all the services that we receive and the protections on data privacy, student privacy, all those things, regardless of what other companies Nexus Capital may own or not own, because it's possible they might own some companies that are controversial. I don't know. But it's important for our community to be able to speak openly around the contract that we have with ACT to provide a very specific service under very specific terms and conditions. And those don't change unless the contract is severed.
And right now, we got a couple of years before that Hagman comes up. So I think we're good till 27 on that, if I remember right. And feel free to correct me because I'm not always right, despite what I like to say in public. So anyway, also, you might be familiar with ACT Connections. I mentioned this to the curriculum directors this past week, but we've had new standards, if you might have heard. Weird. And so our ACT Connections document has been updated to match those new standards. We're working in collaboration with Teaching and Learning. Assessment and Accountability has worked with them over the past 6 months or so to get that ironed out. It's located on the ACT Assessment website. I have a link here for it. You can go to the PDF for it, and please share that with any interested policies. If you're not familiar with this document, it links ACT's standards with relevant Utah standards that match those standards so teachers can know where they can get the best bang for their buck by teaching the Utah standards and thus hopefully help improve their ACT scores. And so simple document, nice PDF, pretty well organized. I mean, I like it.
Yeah, if your teams are doing curriculum mapping or if you're establishing your essentials, standards, any of that stuff, this document should be very helpful.
And I have to admit, I hardly did anything on it, mostly because Rebecca Peterson, who did ACT before me, got a lot of the science stuff done before she left. And so I'm very grateful to her for that because I didn't have to do a lot of writing, just a little editing. So that was nice for Milo and myself working together on that. Yeah, no, language arts had the biggest lift. So that was, like I said, I looked that up. I was like, oh, I got to change all this. And I looked up at the document and went, oh, this has already been updated for science. Awesome. So a couple short meetings and we were done. And I think that's my last slide. So I don't know if anyone else has anything else they want to add.
If you want to make one more plug for
The
Nearpod.
Thank you for the 74 people who logged into Nearpod. I don't know how many, Emily, how many people were actually logged into the meeting?
Right now we have 85, but we had, I think, 112 at the highest.
So see, we're getting better. Good job, guys. Good job.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful spring afternoon.